Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Deep Cover Podcast. There's a couple things I want to hit on this week, and they're not entirely related, but they both elicited thoughts that I've been having. So I kind of want to talk about both, right? So the first is I want to chat a little Olympic basketball with you all, and the second is kind of how we treat players doing things off the field in any sport, basketball, football, soccer, doesn't matter. So let's just jump right into it. Let's talk about the Olympics. So the Olympics are coming to Paris later this month. I find myself incredibly excited for the Olympics, and anybody that knows me knows that this is a pretty big statement because I've never really liked the Olympics, right? And the reason why I'm into it on the basketball side is as I've kind of gotten an appreciation for more and more of these teams and international play has really dominated the NBA, I find myself intrigued and interested about what the Olympics has to offer. And as somebody who lives in America, obviously I'm surrounded here by very impassioned American fans that are hoping to see the U.S. national team get another gold medal. And that's kind of the expectation for the U.S. team, right? They've won numerous medals to the point where when they only won a bronze medal, heavy emphasis on the air quotes there with only, was considered a wide failure in 2004 to the point where they created the Redeem team in 2008, and that obviously was a team that went undefeated and won a gold medal, and they made a documentary about it. It was a big deal. And it's why the Dream Team was created in 1992, even before that, because the college guys that they were sending before just weren't really cutting it. So they kind of assembled all-star teams of U.S. basketball talent. But here's the thing. Right now, the global stage and the international players have never been better. So let's kind of take a quick look at the three groups here. So starting off, you have Australia, Greece, Canada, and Spain in the first group. In soccer, like in the World Cup and the Euros, you have something that's called a group of death. This right here is the group of death. So Spain, starting at the end there, is consistently one of the best teams in international basketball competition. They're frequently ranked in the top three, and this is no exception. Canada is a younger team, but has a lot of star power. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander plays for them. Lou Dort, his teammate, obviously on Oklahoma City. Jamal Murray is there. RJ Barrett is there. So a lot of nice young talent, and I think Canadian basketball is really going to be elevating here in the coming years. No Andrew Wiggins, which I thought was interesting. So they also lack a lot of rebounding size. Dylan Brooks is back for defensive purposes, of course. Then you got Greece, which is a one-man show with Giannis Antetokounmpo. They're always in it because he's a top five player in the world. Then you have Australia, who has a lot of NBA talent as well on there. So that group is really strong. Then you go to Group B. You have France, Germany, Japan, and Brazil. Maybe a little bit of a weaker group, but France and Germany are two very, very skilled teams. You got the Wagner brothers in Germany, Dennis Schroeder. In France, you have a boatload of talent: Nick Batum, Evan Fournier, Victor Wembanyama, Bilal Coulibaly, Rudy Gobert, and I'm really curious to see how the Twin Towers approach of Gobert and Wembanyama on the floor in the FIBA rules, where you don't have defensive 3 seconds and goaltending isn't really a thing. So I wonder how they're going to fare defensively. I would imagine very well. And then lastly, you have Group C, which is the U.S., Puerto Rico, South Sudan, and Serbia. South Sudan's probably the weakest team in this field, but they are just a tremendous story. You talk about the political aspect of, a country that just recently gained independence and, they started this grassroots program about a decade ago, and now they're in the Olympics. It's a huge achievement just to be there. I'm sure they'll give all these teams a little bit of something to think about, but, they are, I think, by far the least talented on paper of all the teams within this group and within the tournament as a whole. Serbia, you of course have Nikola Jokic, right? And oh, again, it's kind of like the Giannis story. You know, you kind of, regardless of the fact that maybe the overall team around him isn't as strong as some others, like Canada or Australia or the US, you have one of the best players in the world, maybe the best player in the world on your team. So you always are going to have a chance there. Puerto Rico, you got an NBA guy in Jose Alvarado, who obviously plays as a rotation player for the New Orleans Pelicans, but they're also going to be a little frisky in this group. And then you have the U.S. team, which is an all-star team, as it usually is. Anthony Edwards, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. You know, basically, if you assembled an all-star team in the NBA, this is generally what you're going to get outside of with the exception of a couple of international players. And I kind of look at this and I think that this is probably one of the most competitive groups in the Olympics that we've seen in a long time. Also, can't discount the fact that the Olympics are taking place in Paris, in France. So the French team maybe has a little bit of a home turf advantage there, right? Maybe that can help carry them throughout. So the crowd should be very pro France throughout their games, throughout this tournament. But that's another aspect. But when it comes to the U.S., I look at this and I say, okay, they have expectations to win this tournament. They want to be nothing less than gold is enough. And it kind of illustrates the way that American fans go into any Olympic competition. It's not about, hey, I'm happy to represent my country. I'm happy to just, compete against the best in the world and all that stuff. It's all about the result, right? And I think the powerhouse nations that end up getting a lot of medals, like the US, China, Russia, those type of countries, their entrance into these competitions is a lot different than, say, a smaller country like Belgium or something, right? Where they're just happy to be there, and if they get one or two medals, it's awesome. But for like a country like the U.S., it's all about asserting your dominance and showing that the best athletes in the world come from the United States, right? And the basketball team has always been that kind of a reflection ever since 1992. So I think there's a little bit of a sort of arrogance that comes to play when it comes to the U.S. men's national team and the women's as well. You know, the women's have been even more dominant than the men's. But we kind of specifically talk about the men's team here. Also, you have a little bit of the drama that's been going on with the Jaylen Brown situation. So basically, Kawhi Leonard unable to go, injured, and so he's withdrawn from the Olympics, which, to be honest, not a huge surprise if you've been following Kawhi since 2019. So he just can't stay healthy. It's just an unfortunate reality. And you would think they would replace him with a like player, right? Another wing. But Jaylen Brown's right there. He's a NBA Finals MVP from this past Finals. And they say, no, we'll take another Celtic. We'll go ahead and grab Derek White as opposed to Jaylen Brown. Now, Jaylen Brown has kind of been very vocal about this. He's upset. He wanted to represent the U.S. He wanted to be a part of the Olympic team. Instead, he is on the sidelines, and his teammate Derek White is going. A lot of people suggesting that Brown, like Kyrie Irving, is an outspoken individual and has been critical of Nike, who is the official supplier of the U.S. men's national team's gear and shoes and stuff. So maybe there's something there. But I think ultimately, a lot of NBA players want to be Olympians because they can pad the resume a little bit, right? Like Joel Embiid had an interesting conundrum, right? He is originally from Cameroon, maintained French citizenship with the idea that he could have joined Team France. Now imagine that if you had Embiid, Wembanyama, and Gobert on the floor at the same time, defenses would be in hell, offenses would be in hell. But that's neither here nor there. But and he decided to go for the American side. Some people have an issue with this. I personally don't because Embiid moved here when he was a teenager. He attended Kansas. He's been playing in the NBA. For all intents and purposes, he's a U.S. citizen, right? So I don't have a huge issue with Embiid saying, "No, I'm good, France," and going to the U.S. But I do think that sometimes what you end up getting when it comes to the Olympics is that a guy's going to go there because it looks really great on their Hall of Fame resume. Because you could easily say, Oh, he never won an NBA title, like it's the case for Carmelo Anthony, but he is an Olympic gold medalist, right? So for those purposes, it's great. And I just think that the expectation every single time for the US is gold medal or bust. I would argue it probably is the biggest pressure cooker in basketball because every single time you go, you're expected to perform at a super high level. And if you don't exceed that, even if it's just silver, you're considered a failure, and then you might not be invited again to this team. So think about the repercussions for somebody like Tyrese Halliburton or Anthony Edwards, young guys who are in their early 20s and they're getting this chance to play in the Olympics. If they flame out here, the repercussions are Tyrese Halliburton and Anthony Edwards might not be getting invited back. And that sounds crazy because these are two young rising stars, but that's the pressure cooker of the Olympics as a U.S. team. Add on top of that, this is kind of the last hurrah for a lot of these players, right? Think about LeBron's 39, KD's 35, 36, Steph 35, 36. These guys aren't going to be coming back for another Olympics more than likely. They'll be all be over 40 by the time the next Olympics rolls around. So it's kind of like, hey, let's go out on top. Let's get these guys a gold medal and that sort of thing. So that's even added even more pressure to it. And I do want to speak though on the the American kind of arrogance that comes with the way we watch the Olympics. Now, this kind of stretches outside of basketball, but I think it still applies to basketball as well. But what always used to make me laugh was it was back when I was working in a restaurant, and I was one of the few sports people there. Me and this other guy we were into it, but by and large, a lot of people weren't into it. And the Olympics came around one year, and every single one of these people was going ahead and talking about how proud they were, how they're going to be dialed into whatever random sport, or dialed into curling to see the U.S. team. They're going to be dialed into track and field, dialed into swimming. And I always thought it's kind of weird, right? Like you never watch these sports, but all of a sudden it becomes must see television. And it's the kind of sense of patriotism and this sense of country and all that. And that's kind of what makes the Olympics special because of how it draws in those non-sports watchers. But also for me as like a basketball fan, I want to watch it because I want to see good international basketball, not as much because I want to like be lathered up in patriotism watching, LeBron James wear the USA jersey, right? And I think that's kind of like an interesting dynamic as well for for fans. Like, let's say you're a Spurs fan and you're watching Victor Wembanyama. How much does your allegiance to your team supersede or undersede your allegiance to watching your country? Right. And it's just kind of an interesting thing. And I also find this kind of patriotism angle to be a little interesting at this time because we're on the cusp of another presidential election in the U.S. So, the idea of patriotism is floated around a lot around this part, and politicians run their platforms on that. So it is kind of an interesting thing. When I look at the groups, I think that yeah, the U.S. should win again, but Jokic is going to give them trouble in the group stage, no doubt about it. You could be seeing an Australia team, a Canada team, a Germany team, a France team in the knockout stages of this tournament that could legitimately give them problems. I think that the roster construction here is interesting. Not a lot of big men on this team. You get Bam Adebayo, you get Joel Embiid, but it's just like those are guys like Bam. You could probably bang down low a little bit, but Joel likes to play on the perimeter, and we already saw in like kind of like the prelim type of warm up games they've been doing that he fouled out pretty quick. And that's because FIBA refs are not going to handle the same shit that you're going to get with NBA refs. You complain too much, you're going to get a technical foul. If you get technicals, those count towards your personal foul total. So I think a lot of these guys need to be careful because the NBA game is officiated so much differently than the international game. And with that, I still think they're the best team in the tournament. I still think they're probably going to get gold. But I just do find it interesting. There's a chance now. Back in '92, the Yugoslavian teams, So basically, what ended up becoming Croatia and then Bosnia and all these other countries and Serbia, they had a little bit of a golden era with Kukoc and Divac and Petrovic and all these guys, and they were considered the biggest threat at the time. Spain during the Gasol era has been considered a big threat, but I don't think we've seen it where there's this many legitimate threats, and there's a lot of pressure for this U.S. team. You got to wonder, are they going to be able to handle it? Or are they going to kind of succumb? Anthony Davis is on this team as well. He's again getting older. Also, it might be one of his last hurrahs as an Olympian. So, really interesting to monitor. And I can honestly say that I'll probably be tuned into this for one of the first times ever because I just find the tournament and the field now so fascinating because there's more competition, and more competition is always going to be better for the TV product. All right, so moving on to the next thing here, I kind of want to discuss how we look at athletes and what they do in their free time. So there was a video that came out recently, and it was of Giants rookie Malik Nabers, and who was drafted with the number 6 pick overall, got his contract done, he got his money, whatever, coming out of LSU. He was at a strip club, he was throwing money out at the performer that was on the stage and whatever, and everybody was kind of quick to comment on this, like, oh, well, what is this? What is he, kind of messages he's sending, blah, blah, blah. And to me, it's just kind of like, what are we doing here where we're focused on this, right? We are so focused on somebody who did nothing illegal. He went into a strip club. He's over 21 years old, and he used his money to have a good time at the strip club with his friends, right? And there's this sense that I find a lot of people have that they feel like athletes have to be these bastions of cookie cutter role models for the future generation because the future generation is watching. And I've always felt that this is dumb because, athletes are human beings. Like, you think about recently, Jalen Brunson, another New York athlete, guard for the New York Knicks, was made an appearance at a WWE event. Tyrese Halliburton was there, so they kind of played on their whole rivalry on the court. It was good TV. And, obviously Jalen coming off his hand surgery, and fans were freaking out, like, oh, he needs to stay home. He can't be compromising his hand and all this stuff. And, like, we're talking about guys who are in the peak primes of their lives. They're millionaires, making a lot of money, highly visible, but they're also in their 20s and they want to have a good time. They want to enjoy themselves. And we're over here always kind of policing them and telling them how they should be living their lives. And I think a lot of people feel that it's okay because, like, well, I'm paying X amount of dollars to catch games at Madison Square Garden, or I'm paying X amount of dollars for this jersey, or I'm paying this, and that. I'm giving them my time, so they should, respect me and my time as much as as much as it's valued, right? And my thing is, you got to let these guys live their lives. You don't want robots on the field. And I will often say, it's the guys who go out and live life and have a good time. Those are the ones that are interesting. Those are the ones that are fun to root for. And I think sometimes I kind of blame Tom Brady for this. And it sounds a little weird, but I kind of do because, like, they had this whole Patriot way thing with Belichick and Brady, and, everybody was almost robotic. No one really did anything in the off season. Everything was just under wraps all the time. And it's not fun, right? Like, maybe I'm looking at this from the perspective of somebody who writes articles, or maybe I'm looking at this from somebody who creates content or looking to create content. But I just don't understand why we crave this whole, like, cookie cutter aspect, right? And it's just something that I think was really popularized with, like, the San Antonio Spurs maybe a little bit, and the New England Patriots more so. Like, when the Eagles won their Super Bowl with Nick Foles and they beat the Patriots, that team went on a epic media tour, and they were drinking, and books were coming out, interviews, they were showing this bravado, and to me that's fun. I don't want a team to win the Super Bowl and then come in and the next day and say, well, time to hit the film. We're on to Cincinnati like the Patriots did for so many years, right? I'd like them to have fun with it. And I'd like them to show some personality. A lot of people got on Jason Tatum with like, they're basically saying like, oh, this guy's basically just emulating all these other celebrations that have happened over the years. Cool, man. Like, let him have fun, right? The things that people do in like championship parades when they like drink too much and whatever. I'm like, these guys are working so hard in the off season and during the season to get ready, to be peak shape, peak performance. There's a lot of pressure that comes with it. So yeah, if somebody is going to be like doing something that's still legal, that's the important thing. I'm not saying not to abide by the law. You still are a citizen of the United States. But, to do something that's fun and legal, why not, right? And we can't just turn into the morality police every single time somebody does something that we may not agree with. And, it's kind of ironic because it's like when Tim Tebow was in the league, they would kind of always say, wow, look at this guy. He wears his faith on his sleeve, blah, blah, blah. Like, you're assuming that every single watcher of the NFL is a devout Christian. There's a lot of atheists, Muslims, Jews that watch the NFL. Maybe they weren't comfortable seeing that, right? But we didn't say a peep about that because, it's some weird sanctity about, religion, right? But, you get somebody who's smoking cigars or goes out drinking or goes to a strip club or whatever, and all of a sudden we turn into the morality police. Like, oh, you gotta set a good example. Like, let these guys live their lives. If somebody wants to talk about their religion in a public forum, cool, man. Do you, right? If somebody wants to talk about or just go out and do their thing and have a good time, that's fine too, right? Athletes shouldn't be kind of placed in this kind of cookie cutter type of box that we sometimes seem to like to put them in, right? They are their own individuals, they are their own people, and we should celebrate that individuality. If I'm watching the Giants and I'm a Giants fan, I'm excited about Malik Nabers because of what he can do on the football field. I shouldn't give two shits about what he does off the field, right? It's just like we have this urge of saying, wow, this person is dumb for doing this, or this person is dumb for tweeting that, or whatever the case may be. And we kind of have to take a step back and realize, look, we are entertained a lot by sports, right? That's part of the gig. It's not all just, hey, go run fast, make shots, catch touchdowns. It's that there's an entertainment aspect, and part of the entertainment aspect is a vibrant personality. So if you're one of those fans that kind of wishes that everybody was just kind of cookie cutter and did the same thing all the time, then sorry to tell you, you're probably watching the wrong stuff. Watch movies that all fit into your kind of box there. You gotta let athletes be athletes. You gotta let them have fun. You can't let them just kind of be all pent up and not let them blow off steam every now and then. And here's the deal. If we all had that kind of money, we'd probably be doing some questionable things financially as well. I'm not saying we'd all go to strip clubs, but we'd all probably spend it frivolously, especially in our early 20s, right? So let the guy have fun. Let all these guys have fun. It's okay. It's okay to let them live their lives, as long as they're not breaking the laws or doing anything nefarious. I personally have no problem with it, and you probably shouldn't either. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up another episode here of the Deep Cover Podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. If you like the podcast, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Spotify has a new commenting feature, so if you have any thoughts about the topics, the episode, anything like that, feel free to leave them down below, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. If you want to catch any of my written pieces, you can catch those on Omar Zaran at Medium. You can also catch some of my NBA stuff that I've recently been putting out at offtheballnetwork.com. I'll link my link tree below so you can check all those new posts out. So until then, till next week, I'll catch you guys next time.